Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and I wasn't going insane. Today we are reading pages 181 to 194. Last time, something weird's going on in the school. You put your teeth in the goo and then you're not in the goo, but technically you're in the goo because they said something to you, and then now your face is clear. Now we're gonna find out why they commandeered. Hint hint. So, without further ado, let's begin. What if my experiment doesn't work? Chris wondered. What if I fail? Ever since middle school, when his class visited the high school science fair and Chris saw amazing experiments conducted by Mr. Little's students, Chris had dreamed of being a science club. What if he didn't belong there? What if he lacked the necessary knowledge and skill? So many of the science club kids were sons and daughters of scientists themselves, or of the doctors or lawyers or college professors. Chris was the son of a clerk and a laborer. Maybe he wasn't the right stock that made the grade of the intellectual environment. Suddenly, Chris felt drained, depleted. Maybe it meant the Fazgoo was draining him of his energy or needed to make the experiment work. Or maybe it was just a feeling of him giving up hope. Either way, he felt exhausted. He lay down on the cot again and fell asleep instantly. Chris woke up groggy with his face in a puddle of his own drool. His surroundings were strangely quiet, no whispering, no sounds of movement. He sat up and then wiped away the drool. The tendril of his index finger reminded him of a check of his experiment's progress. Maybe he was finally working. He instead tried to muster up some hope. The goo had outgrown the petri dish. It didn't look like a mouth of much of anything else, really. It was just a pink blob, slimy and unpleasant, about the size of a baby's fist. It was something, anyway. He just wasn't sure what around him. The room was still quiet. Had everybody else left? After a few seconds, Chris heard rustling, then footsteps, and a voice saying, "He told me everything," followed by Mrs. Little's praise and permission of the student to go. Chris sighed and sat on the cot and waited. He watched his mass in the petri dish, but if there was any progress, it was slow to see. He was akin of watching a paint dry or grass mow. "Permission to enter," a voice said from outside the petition. "Sure," Chris said. Mr. Little stepped in a cubicle. "How's it going, Chris?" I'm not sure, to be honest. Am I the last person left?" Mr. Little smiled. "No, there's a few other stragglers. I'm just making rounds and checking up on everybody's progress." He nodded in the direction of Mabel. "May I?" "Of course." Chris felt nervous as Mr. Little took out of nowhere a finished project. Mr. Little approached the table and looked at Blob, cocking his head in a way that reminded Chris of a family dog. Mr. Little said, leaning down and squinting at the petri dish. "Very curious. Did I do something wrong?" Chris asked. He knew there was to be gone, even though he wouldn't admit to Mr. Little. She should have followed directions and pulled out one of his own teeth at the spot like the rest of the students did. He had taken a way out, but he was a coward. Now he is reaping the consequences. "As experiments go, this one's pretty impossible to mess up," Mr. Little said, rubbing his chin. "You did put one of your teeth in there, didn't you?" "Yes, sir," Chris said, not elaborating on the age or origin of the tooth. "Well, sometimes in science, we just have to admit that we don't know why things are happening what they are. The way I see it, Chris, you've got two choices. You can end the experiment and say it just didn't turn out for whatever reason, dispose of whatever that thing is you got there, and go home and play video games or whatever it is you do in your own time." He smiled. "Or you can acknowledge that something interesting is happening here, even if we don't quite know what it is, and give it some more time to see what happens." Chris didn't have to ask himself which choices real scientists would make. "I'd like to give it some more time if that's okay." Mr. Little smiled and clapped on his back. "It's more than okay. I admire your patience. It's an excellent quality the scientists have. Most scientific endeavors worth nothing doing require a great deal of patience and determination." He looked back at the blob. "And be honest, I'm glad you made a choice, because I'm pretty curious how to see this turns out myself." He gave Chris a little two-finger salute. "I'll check back later, okay?" "Okay, thank you, sir." Chris felt relieved. He had made the right choice, and he received Mr. Little's approval. Maybe it would be a real science club member after all. He had down to wait because he was a scientist did. After a while, there was more movement and rustling around, the familiar sounds uttering different voices. "He told me everything. She told me everything. He told me everything." Each time, there was Mr. Little's approval for the student to leave. Then, there was silence. Finally, feeling like the last person on earth, Chris called, "Mr. Little?" "Yes, Chris." "Am I the only one left?" "Yes, you are." His tone was pleasant. "No worries, though. I should give up so you can go home." Chris wondered if Mr. Little had a wife or some Little was waiting on him. Wondered why the lock-in was taking so long. Mr. Little poked his head inside the cubicle. "Of course not. I've got no place else to be. And if you're willing to wait, so am I." He grinned, and he gave a thumbs up. "Patience and determination." Once Mr. Little disappeared from view, Chris felt another wave of exhaustion. Hoping that the energy draining from him would be funneled into a little pink blob, he laid back down in the cot and lost consciousness immediately. When he awoke, he gasped at the side of the table. A mass was now quintupled in size, and was now far too large to fit into a biohazard bag. He was still slimy and pink, but no longer the insert blob. Shape somewhat like a limbless human torso. It was now pulsing with life. Chris felt excited but a little fearful as he approached the creation. The way it expanded and contracted made him feel something might jump out of the creature he saw the horror movie once. He stood over the pulsing mass. Its skin, we should call it that, was translucent pink, like a bubble blown from a bubble gum. Beneath it was the source of the pulsing, a cluster of bag-like structures and beating into a rhythm. He seemed strangely familiar, though Chris didn't know why. Chris looked at the tendril, now thicker and stronger, and connected them to a nearly formed organism on the table. The tendril pulsed in unison with the strange thing's organs. Chris gasped and realized why the pattern pulsing seemed so familiar. The thing's organs and the tendril that connected him were throbbing at the beat of Chris's own heartbeat. A shudder ran through him, and he was overcome with a sudden need to empty his bladder. Now, how he had done that, he realized he had gone to the bathroom for hours. Not since right after school dismissal rang. His knowledge increased his sense of urgency. But now, he would manage to go down the hall of boys' restrooms when he physically connected his weird, seemingly living thing. He wondered how the other kids managed it. He probably kind of needed to go in the first place because they had completed the experiment just so much quickly than he had. Plus, the experiment hadn't used something so large and unwieldy. Just as Chris decided, desperate enough to call for Mr. Little and make a pathetic confession that he needed to go to the restroom and he didn't know how, the pressure of the bladder disappeared. He looked over the thing on the table, which expelled a large amount of fluid that hit the floor with a splash. Was that his pee? And what was it doing over there? Chris knew he wouldn't have been embarrassed. He was pretty sure he had just peed to the floor of a science classroom, after all, and a big no-no if there ever was one. But mostly he was confused. Wasn't his pee supposed to come out of his own body? He looked like a tendril. Now thicker and stronger, it was a tube connecting his body to the thing, feeding it like an umbilical cord that connects a mother to her unborn baby. Maybe his pee was traveled from him to the tube and expelled the thing on the table, but why? He watched the thing pulse some more. Whatever it was, he didn't like it. He didn't like being connected to it. He was like acknowledging letting it leach energy and grow bigger and stronger while he grew more exhausted and weak. It was time to cut the cord. The problem was, he didn't have anything to cut it with. He looked around an almost empty cubicle and spotted unused pliers. They weren't as good as a knife, or as strong as a pair of scissors, but they were still better than anything a severed cord with his bare hands. But he used the pliers to grip and squeeze the cord, and then gave a hard yank to tear it apart and break the connection. He poised the pliers and grabbed the tendril just above where it connected and left index finger. Then he squeezed. It felt like somebody was choking the life out of him. Pinching the tube cut off air supply somehow, and he fell to the floor gasping, landing on the puddle of what was certainly his own urine. He released the tendril from the pliers, and his breath started to come back. He was too lightheaded and get up quickly. Then he lay on the wet floor a few minutes, panting over like an overheated dog. There was no way he was ended connection between him and disturbing result of the experiment, or were the connection bound together like conjoined twins who shared a vital organ. He pulled himself up and willed himself to look at the massive puddle. His torso had lengthened, and the small pink buds were visible in the arms and legs with him now. Somehow he hadn't been able watching a neck and a head had formed. The head was hairless, featureless, and horrifying. Chris backed away slowly, bumped into his cot. He didn't want to look at anything anymore. He couldn't look away either. It radiated a horrible fascination, like a gory accident on the side of a highway. He sat on the cot and looked at it until he realized his vision had become blurry and distanced. It was strange. He had never been trouble with his eyes before. He had a hand over his right eye, and suddenly it was like the world had plunged into blackness. He reached up and put his hand over his left eye, and what he found there made him cry in terror. His left eye was gone. It was impossible, of course. The loss of red blood cells and level anxiety made him corrupted and precipitations, making him paranoid, maybe even making him hallucinate. He lifted up his left eye again, but he felt only a gaping empty socket. Impossible, he told himself. He looked at the tendril. Inside of the translucent tube, an orb traveled away from Chris and toward the evolving pink form of the table. The orb was being pushed along by the tendril's pulsations. It was the size of the shape of a human eyeball. What the? Chris' hand shot up to where eyeball used to be, and a popping sound, and a cork being pulled from a bottle. And then Chris looked over the thing on the table, looked back at him and Chris' left eye. The face no longer featureless. It was now cycloptic. So Chris knew the creature wouldn't have content the state of a cyclops for long. He was going for the other eye, and more parts of him as well. Even without the benefits of having both eyes, Chris could see things clearly now. The organs that throbbed beneath the creature's translucent skin was his organs, or they used to be. They had been used as a living organ donor for his thing, but he wouldn't be a living donor for much longer. With his vital organs being siphoned through the tube one by one, he wouldn't have much time left. Chris pulled the tendril, trying to rip it away from the body, but he connected it solidly, as his fingers were his hands. Gripping the tube constricted and made him lose his breath. He tried to get up with his vague, hopeless thought of running where he could get help. Even if it meant dragging the thing behind him in a broken kite on the string. But he found himself too weak to stand. But he still had his voice, didn't he? Where he was nothing but to do a string. Help, he yelled. His voice was thinner and weaker than he could like to be. Help, Mr. Little, anybody, I'm over here, help me. His cries for help was silenced. Now all the other students had gone home. Mr. Little gone home too? Would he have left out without saying goodbye, without having Chris' permission to leave as well? Chris could not remember having felt so utterly alone. The yelling had tired him out. Everything tired him out. His muscles felt non-existent. His arms and legs were out of floppy, overcooked noodles. He sank down into the cot. He needed to think about a plan, a way to escape. But weakness and fatigue overtook him. He didn't mean to fall asleep. He wasn't strong enough to fight. A wave of exhaustion slept over him. When he awoke, he opened his one eye and saw one thing sitting on the edge of the table across from him. Except the thing it wasn't a thing anymore. It was a boy. A boy who, except for a strangely pink skin tone, looked exactly like Chris. It was Chris' height and build, with the sandy brown hair and wearing Chris's clothes and looking at Chris like he had been the one with his left eye. Did that mean Chris was naked? He looked down at the reclining body and saw that he didn't have enough structural integrity to support clothes. Chris's body was devoid of muscle and bone. He was mass, a blob. He had no idea how he'd be still alive, how he would be aware of little of him left. There was no way he would hold out much longer. Chris understood he would never see his mom and dad and Emma again. He would never take another bike ride to the dairy bar and lake with Josh and Kyle. Maybe somebody else would have taken a pork chop for his walks and feed him his dinner. Thing got down from the table and used Chris's bones and muscles to walk over to the cot. With his one remaining eye, Chris saw a creation. He saw the creature look at him like nobody else would ever know the difference. It would go to Chris's house and take his place in Chris's family. It would sit at the dinner table with his mom and dad and Emma, eating hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. It would play pork chop. It would study the cool beans, coffee, and go to school with science club meetings. Chris saw his own life was going to go on without him. Chris struggled to speak. His throat, mouth were more as parched as dessert, and pretty sure his lips were gone. It was hard to make himself heard. Listen, his voice finally came out as croak. My mom and dad, they're going to love you because they love me. Be nice to them. He stopped to try and catch his breath. Breathing used to be so easy when you never thought about it. Be nice to my sister too. She's a good kid. Girl Scout. She's your sister now. The words were hard to get out, and they needed to say, Miss Thomas, our neighbor. She's old. She's a nice lady. Help her when you can, and play with pork chop. The creature furrowed his brow and looked confused. I am to play with a pork chop? Chris felt his laugh strength setting. He whispered, Pork chop is my dog. Yours, now. Chris felt a tendril connected him to life disintegrating. Take care of him, he said. And his words came out softly. He was afraid he could hear them. Chris felt a strange sensation of suction where his right eye was, and then everything went black. He listened to his eyeball was sucked through the tube, and more slurping sounds too, and the other parts of him were drained up in the tendril. Parts he knew he wouldn't live about. And it was like the creature was drinking him, sucking out his last organs through a long straw, like the dregs of a milkshake, leaving only an empty vessel. Chris, as the creature would have learned to call itself, stood over a shapeless mass of empty flesh in the cot. He opened the biohazard bag and stuffed the fleshy remains of the experiment inside of it. He was surprised when he was able to cram all of it into one bag, and then he picked it all up. Contents surprisingly light. He left the cubicle and found Mr. Little sitting at the desk, drinking from a styrofoam cup of coffee and munching on a donut. Well, good morning, Chris, Mr. Little said, standing up and brushing crumbs from his mustache. You had a long night, didn't you? But you don't keep me in suspense. Did you finally complete the experiment? Did you get the results you wanted? The new Chris's eyes were wide and full of wonder. Soon he would be stepping out of the classroom and out of the school and would roll for the first time. Chris handed the biohazard bag to Mr. Little. He looked into the teacher's eyes and said, He told me everything, he said. As Chris walked out the school building, the sun was warm on his face. The sky was blue. The clouds were white and fluffy. The birds had chirped in the trees. Chris smiled. It was a beautiful day. Wow. That's, that was definitely an ending. I think it was very known that that was going to be the ending. Because, obviously, it's a blob. But, like, still, very interesting that we get the point of view of Chris and Pork Chop and the old woman from across the way. But also, I think, because we've read the Tales of the Pizzaplex books after the fact, of course, or before the fact, I think that Mrs. Thomas and this Chris character are from, the first Tales of the Pizzaplex, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be wrong. Because Brooklyn was also a name of a character from that same story. Honestly, though, I will say, number 7 was really good. Like, not gonna lie. But it could have been better. I think one of these days I'll have to make a tier list of all the FNAF books. I definitely will have to, and maybe even make it an ending segment for the videos. Of like, Yeah, definitely the videos. But yeah, it's good. It's just not one of my favorites. Like I think my favorite one was from one of the Tales of the Pizzaplex ones because all of the stories were really good in that one. But yeah, I mean for this entire book, and I'm gonna go in a little more detail because I never do. I probably should. Um, the first one with Tyler and being a baby. The second one with Reed, I think his name was Reed, and what was it with Reed's story? Oh gosh, I'm hitting blanks. Oh, Reed and the endoskeleton with his rich buddies. And then this finally with Chris and trying to fit in. I think this was more like aimed towards like teenagers cuz the last story, so the first story followed a parent. The second story followed a kid, and the third story followed a just a poor kid. Like I think they all ran down their own rabbit holes of the different times of being a teenager, but of course added the horror element of Five Nights at Freddy's. So yeah. Although the second one didn't have any Fnaf, which kind of hurts the book's integrity. But yeah, one of these days I'll have to. You know what? I can just make a tier list right now. What am I talking about? Hold on a second. Yeah, so we're gonna do this real quick. I'm sorry, I didn't want to actually put this at the last part of today's video. We're gonna do dog breeds as well, I think. No, probably not. We're probably just gonna end it with a tier list today, that's probably how we should end all of the books. Is we should end it by talking on the tier list instead of the dog breed, because I feel like that would be, I don't know, better. Just like to explain it more. I think that'd be best. So today's episode is gonna be kind of long. I'm sorry, there's not gonna be any dog breeds of the day. I apologize for that. But yeah, so let me explain my findings real quick. I hope you're able to read this as well. Um, so yeah, Into the Pit. Honestly, all three stories were fantastic. Cause like, wow, it genuinely just it delivered. As a first book, it had the story of Into the Pit, which is also a video game now, which is crazy of a thought that these books are becoming the video games. I'm so happy. I want a video game on one book. I'll explain that later. Actually, that might be my next tier list. Next thing on the list. I want a video game on one specific book that I've read on the channel, and that's Haps. Haps would be an awesome video game. I'm putting it in A tier because I really don't remember it. I so far right, I have 2 and 3 in my hand. So maybe I'm being overzealous when I'm, pulling out Haps of all books. But honestly, the story of the little boy being chased down by the robot. Let's see. I have the book here, and not all tier list videos are going to be this long, I promise. But let's see. Haps told the story of Help Wanted, which was the story of Steve. Um, let's see. What was this one? DJ Dan, the Music Man. Wasn't this a story of the man who yeah, okay, yeah. So so Help Wanted was the story of a man who was forced into his family. The second story was Haps, of 2 little kids being stuck fighting a robot and both dying. That was really good. And then the third story, B7. Oh, B7. Oh my goodness. B7's one of my favorite stories. So yeah, this is actually going S tier as well. Cause good start. Both are fantastic, like, in their own right. So Haps is also going S tier because I love that story. Now let's go back to let's go way back to Lally's game. I'm just gonna put it in B for right now, because I don't know the stories by heart. Lally's game told the story of, let's see, it's called Frailty. Nurse Macy, um, Robert, Robert's face, um, hurry, get this door open. Nurse Macy called out, security guard, um, uh, oh, this was a story of the girl who was a nurse, but also secretly kind of dead. She shaved off her cross to save people's lives. That was a good story. Cade and Debbie. Oh, the story of the trunk, and then like, oh, all the weird stuff that happened inside the trunk, where it was Lally, like Lally himself, the little doll. That was pretty good. And then finally, Under Construction, um, which told the story of jelly beings filled the garage. Oh, okay. So Lally's game was also pretty top tier too. But honestly, because Lally's game has my favorite story in all of them, which was Under Construction. Under Construction is my favorite story of all. But honestly, I can only put this in A because it's like the first one with the kid and the guy going to war. That's not FNAF. That just feels like, I don't know. I don't know what it feels like. Okay, but we never sadly got to any more than 2 of the Tales of the Pizzaplex because Somnophobia I kind of cut off because again, at the beginning of this book I cut it off because again I could not remember reading this book. Okay, but now it's time for Fetch. Fetch told the story of a robotic dog who chased down a kid. And honestly, it's really reminiscent of the story we just got done reading of the contorted robot that chased the kid. It's very reminiscent of that. So that was good. Lonely Freddy told the story of a kid who, oh gosh, I think it was like a kid who talked to a Freddy at nights, but it was weird. And then Out of Stock told the story of Oscar, who I usually can remember these stories really well. Oscar. I'm hitting blanks. Oh, okay. Yeah, I told the story of Oscar and his friends who were all being chased by a plush trap animatronic in a abandoned pizzeria. Pretty good, but like honestly, it's not memorable for the other stories. Fetch and that story kind of made it memorable, so I'm gonna put it at an honest C. It's pretty good for stories. It's just not very. I doubt anything's going in F. Like really, I really doubt that. Um, I have not touched the Silver Eyes, Twisted Ones, or Fourth Closet. I need to, trust me. That's probably going to be my celebration for finishing all of the Fazbear Fright books. Twisted One's going to be the celebration for finishing all of the Tales of the Pizzaplex books. And Fourth Closet will either be my just end of the FNAF series, or I don't know. I really couldn't tell you right now. But I know I do have every other story except this one. This is the only story I don't have, and honestly, it makes me so sad because it's like that's the one story. It's not the one story I want or I need, but it's the one story I am definitely missing. And that genuinely saddens me because that means I'm just missing a whole thing. Okay, no, I know what it's going to be. So, Silver Eyes is going to be when I'm done with all the Fazbear Frights. Twisted Ones will be when I'm done with all of the Tales of the Pizzaplex. And Fourth Closet will be after I'm done with all of the dark stories. At the end of every single FNAF book, there's a story. They all tell the story of a man named, or the Fazbear Frights one, they all tell the story of a man named Larson. And the Tales of the Pizzaplex book stories all tell the story of a girl named Gil. So I'm going to be covering those as the dark stories. That's what I'm going to be kind of calling them. They don't have an official name, to my knowledge. Back to the tier listing. Fazbear Frights number 3. So this one's pretty top tier because it tells the story of the girl and the doll. Or the girl and the girl who's late to her job all the time, and the clock that looks like a baby doll that she had when she was a kid. That's pretty top tier. I do like 1:35 a.m. because it does explore the idea of someone who has a job but still has a type of fear for it. So it's like it kind of gives a feeling of nobody's safe, I guess is the best way. Where Fetch and Into the Pit both kind of tackled the idea of kids. Only kids can be affected by it. Let's see. Room for One More was the story of, let's see. Room for One More was the story of the mini Renas attacking the security guard as he worked the night shift. He was sick and then he got attacked by the mini Renas and he's filled with mini Renas. That's a pretty good story too. The New Kid. The New Kid told the story of Devin. Oh god. I am hitting blanks. Devin, Batman. Devin told the story of a new kid, told the story of Devin, and some new kid named Kelsey. I think the story kind of ran around the idea of a kid named Devin who just kind of lost his friends to this new guy. Honestly, not a story I can remember. Not a particularly good story to remember, you know? So this is going to go into B. Because it has the first, I think this is the first time they kind of talk on adults experiencing it, unless Into the Pit does, which I could be 100% wrong on. But yeah, it's pretty good. Now, please give me a moment as I go put away these books and come back. And I'm back. Okay, so next on the chopping block is Step Closer. I can immediately, without thought, put this at A tier. Because I quote this book all the time. To be a pirate, you must lose an eye and a arm, yarg. Steps Closer told the story of a kid who wanted to prank his little brother. Basically that's it. It was honestly a really fun story of a guy trying to, but every time he tried to do something, he almost lost an eye and an arm, yarg. I used to make fun of this book. It's really good. Dance with Me. Oh, isn't this a story? This is the story of the girl who stole from a woman, but got her Ballora glasses, and Ballora started chasing around this criminal. She changed her ways. That's a really good story too. Now, Coming Home was the story of, I usually just get it all from the last page. Coming Home told the story of Chica the chicken stealing this girl's daughter because she was dead and she mentally thought her daughter was still alive. We also get the perspective of the dead daughter. That was a fantastic story, honestly. Step Closer, honestly, probably might be my new S tier. With Into the Pit would probably go down. Now, they could both be S tier books, because I know all three of them. That's kind of what makes it S tier, is if it's memorable. Is what makes me put it in S tier. Because I remember Into the Pit, I remember the 3 stories. I remember the 3 stories of Haps. I remember the 3 stories of Fox Boy. Okay, but now let's see. Blackbird. Blackbird told the story of two college students. They both were really into theater. One of them gets hit by a train. And the other one, they had a fight before he gets hit by a train, and he gets chased around by this idealism of a blackbird chasing him. It's pretty good, considering it's the first and only animatronic to my knowledge that can fly. The Real Jake told the story of The real Jake told the story of Jake, but what? Um, Jake and medicines. Oh no, this told the story of the kid in the. This told the story of the kid in the medical ward, not the one in Into the Pit. Okay. So yeah, that actually does lower Into the Pit because I don't know what that medical story is then. If this is if the real Jake is the story of the kid who had a military father. So that does kind of lower Into the Pit because I actually don't know where the heck Into the Pit lies. Hide and Seek followed the story of Toby and his friends, and they all are Hide and Seek. What did it? Oh, the story of the kid who played the robotic game, kind of like in a Chuck E. Cheese store, and he broke into the machine and what's it called? He tried to beat a game of hide and seek to beat his brother's high score, but ends up killing himself on accident. That's all Blackbird. Blackbird is pretty good. Two of them that are really good. So I'll put it in A. Honestly. Now the second to last one, Bunny Call, because we haven't read any of the other ones yet. Bunny Call is very interesting, and I'm surprised that this is number 5. I felt like it was number 2. The first story, called Bunny Call, kind of follows the story of a man who, by the beautiful Andrea Wagner, followed the story of a man who wanted to take his family out on vacation. He almost gets killed by a bunny rabbit. He has to protect his family, which is the first time a parent has to protect his family and doesn't have a dead parents, which is such a common trope in these books. And then, yeah, so he protects his family, and next day he has a nice appreciation for them. In the Flesh follows a boy named Matt. Let's see. Let me read the fast pages. In the Flesh followed the story of a man who... Oh, In the Flesh follows the story of that man, of a man who wanted to be rich, ended up becoming really fat, and then a plush animatronic exploded out of his chest, and it was deemed a suicide by the police. This story was weird. I will say that. It was not, it didn't feel like a FNAF story. It felt like fan art. It felt like fan fiction. But, you know, honestly, this was made by Ellie Cooper, and she makes very disturbing stories. She's the one who made my favorite story in Lally's game. So that makes sense. Let's see. The next story was titled The Man in Room 1280. Okay, I don't even need to read that one. Followed a priest who believed to have met William Afton, which is weird because he's technically not in the books. This story was kind of cool, because it kind of just followed him going into the place and then changing himself into Ennard, I guess. It's a weird story. It kind of just follows Ennard around if you really wanted to know. But yeah, so it honestly is just so, it was just a very weird story. So I'll put it in B because they're all memorable, sure, but they're all in their own sense weird. Though I do kind of want to put it above 135 because it does tackle a new idea. And finally, for the finale of all these books, we have to finally go and tackle The Cliffs. The Cliffs, which we literally just got done reading today, was an interesting set of books. I feel like this is kind of the start of them becoming more twisted. Also, really, really cool fact, this is the start of the end of books. By that, I mean, I have not read any books from this point on. I read Subnecophobia, the one with the moon in front of it, or this one. I've read this one. in my own time, which I'm not going to rate it just yet because, you know, I want to do the proper live rating. But, you know, I just, want to explain that. I've read that one, but I've never read anything after the Cliffs. I've read all of the Cliffs. So, the next couple stories, I'm actually going to give you guys a general reaction. Because I read all these stories before I even wanted to do audiobooks, which is weird to say. But the Cliffs followed the 3 simple stories. One of a dad and his kid. One of a... What was the second? A kid trying to meet friends. And the third being of a poor kid trying to make it with rich kids to get a good future. All of them ending in their own gruesome ways, which you have probably learned because this is the video we have been reading today. This has also been a very long video because of the tier listing. Sorry for that. They will be shorter next time, I swear. But honestly, they're all really good. It's just, I don't know, the Fnaf element's kind of being pushed out of it. Like, they're all really, really good. They're all, one of them's even made by the great Andrea Wagner, who I have a lot of admiration for her way of descriptive words. But yeah, so her stories were good. It's just, you know, strange at the same time. So I'm gonna put this in B because it was good. It's just, you know, and all memorable, of course, but I don't think I'd ever quote them. You know, I don't think I've ever quote. I'm keeping it at C because that's fair. Look at all these other stories we're gonna have to keep up with. I do have my account on, right? No, I don't. Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm gonna quickly log in. Pray to God that it saves. But that's not your guys' concern. But yeah, that's basically it for today. Sorry, I'm trying to do 2 things at once. I'll do it after. What? Just do it after. God. Hope you guys are fantastic, wonderful day. People like, be efficient. Next time we're not doing a FNAF book. Next time we're doing another book. Like we did with the Island of the Blue Dolphins. So that's gonna be a little confusing. But yeah, super fantastic, wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.